It is the 1 year anniversary of this podcast. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Welcome to the Alive and Aligned podcast, a show dedicated to helping you live a life of truth and share your fullest gifts with the world. I'm your host, Pete Byrne, and I'm here to open your mind to new perspectives, to introduce you to some epic humans who are already out there living their deepest truth. So now just grounding in, taking a breath, letting go of anything you're still holding on to from today, and just opening up to receiving this episode now. Let's dive on in. Welcome to this solo episode of the Alive and Aligned podcast. And it is a very celebratory episode because it is the 1 year anniversary of this podcast. Woo-hoo-hoo, woo-hoo. Happy birthday to me. This episode is called Consistency for the Win, and it is a reflection on the lessons I've learned from 1 year of podcasting. It's been a very fulfilling and super enjoyable, inspiring year. I've got to talk with some epic humans, as was always my intention, as you can hear in the intro to this episode, the intro to the podcast. And you know, it's not been without its set of challenges, of course, as well. But I really want to dive into some of the lessons I've learned. Just a couple of the really key pieces that I think, whatever it is you're creating and doing in your life, I hope that these can maybe inspire you to start your own podcast or your own creative endeavor pursuit, or just whatever you're creating, like any kind of mission or purpose that you're looking to birth into the world that feels like maybe big and daunting. I hope that these lessons that I've been able to take from this first epic year will be something that can kind of make you reflect on, like, okay, well, how could I, bring more of that into my endeavors and bringing what really matters and is truly important to me into the world. So first lesson that I've learned in this last year is the joy of delayed gratification. Okay. We've all heard that experiments where, the experimenter brings in a marshmallow and says to the child, you can eat this marshmallow now, or you can wait and you get two later. And, we're testing the children in this case, who eats the marshmallow and who waits for the two. And there was some kind of like correlation then later on that the people who waited for the two marshmallows had like scored higher in, test scores and greater quality of living and all these other things later in life. So, this idea is around, and it's the idea of the oxytocin, and the positive long-term happiness versus the dopamine hit versus the quick fix. And that's really been something that I've needed to lean into in this last year because, in starting this podcast, there was that dopamine rush that was like, woo, here we go. We're launching a podcast. We got all these episodes, cool guests, how exciting, my life is amazing. And then as that, honeymoon period dies off, it's like, okay, well, what now? And then it's like all the, kind of like in a relationship, like all the potential negatives or downsides of it start to come to the surface where it's like, I'm having to go and book these sessions and record and find guests. And then, I'm paying for these things. And then I'm posting and editing and writing all this stuff. And then is anyone even listening? Does anyone even care? What's the point? Is it a waste of time? Maybe you should just give up. And then, I really kind of had to come back to the why. Like, why am I doing this in the first place? Ultimately, like the life I want to create for myself is one where I get to do this, where I get to have these conversations. And so it's an investment in me. How fucking lucky am I that I get to create this, that I get to sit here talking to you, you poor thing, and, talking to these amazing people that I get to speak with and creating content and going down these rabbit holes and thus inspiring people. Like, it's like so cool. So coming back to this piece around consistency, right? I was looking at a video from Stephen Bartlett, about how he grew his podcast. And, again, it just came back to this thing of like him showing the graph, like the actual numbers of like when he started posting consistently every Monday, how his numbers just started to take off. And it was just that thing of like people trusting and knowing that, you're going to be there, you're going to show up. And that gives them the trust that when they come back, they're going to have that new content. They're going to have something to look forward to. And that allows that relationship to be built. So that's my commitment, I suppose. I'm like, I got to continue to show up. So the beginning of this year, like I really nail that in the ground to say for a minimum 6 months, I'm going to be posting every Tuesday. It's going to be coming out. Like I'm going to have a new episode every week for at least the next 6 months, just to really keep that motivation up. And I've really, like, once that was locked in and like I'm doing this, you know, that was really a game changer, because like now the container was there. I'm like, okay, well, I've got, you know, how many episodes, 4 episodes a month to do. So let's get going, you know, and it just like got to work. And in the creation of that container for myself, of that, you know, creative outlet, then it's like, then I got to fill it with all the things. And it was like, as soon as the container and the opportunity was there and I made that commitment, it just started to fill with all these ideas, and hence here we are. So the second element of this, like these lessons, like the second lesson would be the pleasure of the process. Okay, so learning to fall in love with all those elements that I thought were a bit annoying in the beginning. So, of course, bringing in my epic assistant, Aline, who's been helping with the clips and, you know, putting a lot of that stuff together, and we work together on those, but like also working with, you know, my friend Angus, who's my producer as well. He's been crushing it and really supporting me from the beginning. But really getting to just like tune into all the different parts of it. And this process of like the creation, it's not all glam and sexy. It's not all just sitting in the chair going deep. There's actually a lot of stuff around, you know, the system's been set up, and, you know, the scheduling and, you know, getting creative about how we can cut these clips up and like really put forward good value. So all of that, I've just got really like, in accepting these parts, I've learned to like really enjoy them, you know, so that's been great. The trust on a deeper level is that, like, you know, in doing this, I'm acquiring greater and greater levels of skill in all these areas. Like I'm getting really good at how to ask questions, how to like set up a video studio, how to, you know, find guests, and then how to promote the podcast, and how to write copy for it, and how to record intros, and, you know, all these like different pieces of what I'm doing get just like improved and improved. And there's a deeper trust based on what I've experienced in the past of like, you know, I learned to sing for, you know, 15, 20 years. What's the point in that? You'll never make any money. And then boom, getting paid like a shit ton of money to write a song for a business. It's like, oh, okay, that's possible. I didn't know. I never saw that, but I needed to learn those skills in order for that to become a reality. So, you know, I'm just really trusting in that, you know, again, trusting in that process. There's also this piece of like the lesson of like the fulfillment that comes from being in service to something greater. So, you know, being able to share these interviews and these stories with people, like learning about people, and in me sharing them and like drawing these things out of these people, how other people, like you sitting at home, you're listening to this, you get to learn from that as well. You get to grow and change and be inspired. And it's like, wow, I get to do that. Like what a fucking lucky deck of like hand of cards I've been pulled, you know? So I wouldn't change that for the world. The other piece around like the lesson I've learned is like the joy and importance of consistently investing in my dreams. So consistently, like, you know, creating this persona and this like, this universe of Pete, you know, and the podcast is such a big part of that. So, you know, in doing this, it's been a vote for, you know, all that I stand for, all that I'm about. You know, we got the mad, crazy songs that come out every now and again, just pull out the guitar and kind of have a little jam on the episode, or like these solo explorations, and just like the joy I get in being able to like have an outlet to share these in, so that like later when, you know, the inevitable book comes, like watch this space, but I now have a resource of all these different ideas that I've been you know, being able to allow flourish, and then I get feedback on them from people, and then I can continue to refine and improve them. So it's just this constant like momentum that's been built and growing. It's so epic. Like, and instead of me waiting to already have the perfect life and then start the podcast, it's like taking action now. That's been a really big part of it. Yeah. And also the final piece is that like so many of the ideas that I've had without the container for me to like express that creativity into, they may not have ever seen the light of day. They may have just stayed in my head when I was like, you know, in a coaching session driving along, and I had this analogy, and like I explain it and it lands and it really changes that person's perspective and maybe their life. And then I kind of just let it go and forget it, you know, but now I'm like, oh no, I'm going to write that down. I could do a podcast episode on that. How good. Even this episode was a reflection I was having one day in my, or like a couple of days ago in my just when I was in my office, and I was just like, wow, like how much fulfillment I've received from the consistency of showing up for this, and how much fulfillment I will continue to do so. So yeah, the main, as I said, just to summarize those lessons, the delayed gratification and how important that is, like, you know, tuning into that and like playing the long game, like the infinite game, as our friend Simon Sinek says. Like, I'm not trying to do this to make a quick buck. It's going for the long run. And as you step into your creative endeavor and pursuit, like, how can you continue to, you know, look at the 5-year, the 10-year, the 20-year plan of like who you want to be and who that person is, and create from that place in the moment. The next part is like learning to love all the elements of what you're doing. So, you know, if you're bringing any kind of creation to life, like what are the bits that you're great at? And then how can you also like upskill and get good at the parts that maybe don't seem so sexy up front, but like actually become humbling, like washing the dishes at home. It's like, you know, it gets to humble us a little bit sometimes. And then you get to outsource it at a certain point as well. But like just, you know, leaning into that a little bit. Tuning into that something greater, that service. You know, how can you bringing your gifts alive, like be of service to others, and how can you be, you know, creating a legacy for yourself that, you know, when you're old and gray or dead and gone, like that this something lives on. Your ideas, like, because we are nothing more than like our name and our body and our ideas and our, you know, the essence of our soul. So it's like in getting to bottle up parts of ourselves and release them to the world, like we're creating that that ripple effect that can, you know, that's really, I believe, what we're here for, you know, to just continue to pay it forward in the same way that I've been impacted by many amazing, beautiful people in my life. And yeah, also just continuing to invest in your dreams and choosing that path, like choosing the path of, you know, choosing yourself, really, you know, putting your dreams number one and doing the things that were going to bring you closer to that instead of waiting. Just stop waiting. Don't be doing it anymore. Don't be saying, when I make all that money, then I'll do the thing. It's already available. So these are my thoughts. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and the 1-year anniversary. And I'm looking forward to hearing you and communicating my lessons from you too. So have an amazing day, and I'll see you next time. You.